Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Essential Podcast. Today, we'll be focusing on a topic about market share with all the different competitors out there, how companies are taking a stand and um, adjusting their businesses to take more of that pie of the market. Super excited to hear from Paul from Columbia Home Services today. His experiences, insights. So, starting straight off, could you introduce yourself and your company a little bit?
Yes, good morning. My name is Paul Adams. I'm the founder and CEO of Columbia Home Services. We're a residential platform focused on heating and air conditioning, plumbing, and electrical. Um, we started our company just about 2 years ago and currently operate in 6 states and have over 300 employees performing essential services for our customers.
Wow. So yeah, it's grown pretty quickly. I guess what was your role in the starting of the company and up to this point, what role have you played?
Yeah, I sort of architected the thesis having spent a career in the trades, probably nearly 30 years. Um, and so the thesis was to partner with legacy brands, with really great people, with no geographical preference. And over this sort of 2 year period, we've partnered with 11 different companies to stand up the platform nationally.
Interesting. With this partnership, what kind of services are you guys offering? What are you bringing to the table with these partnerships?
Yeah, look, I think essential services is simply defined as you have lights to keep on, toilets to flush, and houses to cool. And as long as that exists, essential services will be there. It's generally recession proof. It's something that kind of makes the world go round. So the trades are very necessary. And so what we see higher demand than there is supply, particularly with the number of single family homes that exist in the US today. These essential services are in high demand, and it's not really driven by price. It's really driven by availability. When can my contractor service and or replace what it is that I need to feel more comfortable at home?
There you go. So you guys found that need. You found that, yeah, like you said, it's not necessarily about price, but how fast you can get there, how fast you can solve those needs. So
It's generational, right?
yeah,
The thing about essential services is that these legacy brands have been serving generations of families in their markets for as long as I can think. And, families hand down these legacies house by house in every geography. So it's one of the longest standing services that we have in the US.
there you go. And so with that relationship, are you and with that philosophy that you guys have, are you helping these legacy brands, cut that response time, increase that efficiency, or how do you really influence them and their business?
I think one of the biggest dilemmas for legacy brands is that there are very few children of owners that are interested in taking over these businesses. So owners are thinking about their exit strategy. They're thinking about, do they deleverage themselves and stick with it? Do they just merely sell? And so our partnership is designed to allow the owner, uh, call it a second bite at the apple, to take some chips off the table, maybe roll a little bit of equity, and then maybe achieve far greater valuation and create some sort of generational wealth in hopes that whoever they partner with will take care and custody of the legacy that they've built over several years. But the reality is, many of the kids in these families don't want to take over the trades anymore. It's not as popular with the younger generations. And probably our biggest fear as an industry is the limited amount of supply of labor.
Mm,
But what
there you
we
go.
do is we put more fuel in their tank. So if you think about the choice between having rich parents or poor parents, which one would you pick?
There you go. Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And I mean, you hear a lot going around that there's this large wave that a lot of business owners are getting into their 60s, even 70s at some point. I guess you guys are, catching in on that trend, catching in on that wave, you know.
Yeah, and our hopes is that even if there is some sort of transition period with the seller, that during that period of time we can identify either somebody internally or find the right person that can carry on that legacy. What we don't do when we partner with a company is we don't change the name. You can't discount what a legacy brand means in a particular market. And in essential services, it's nearly not impossible, but it's just not like uh, likely that you'll be able to start a greenfield operation and really have a brand take off in a short amount of time. It takes years to develop a reputation. Fortunately, social media aids the reputation sort of building process, but you've got to demonstrate craftsmanship in order to have those customers come your way. So it takes time. So we invest in brands that have been there. We just invested in is 100+ years old, and that's just something that you can't replace.
No, and I think it's interesting how you mentioned social media, and I mean some of these elements are pretty new, especially to these people who might be getting near retirement and things like that. With introductions of things like social media or other changes in the market, I mean, what kind of trends have you seen recently that you guys have had to adjust to?
Well, social media is interesting, but marketing is even far more interesting. Historically, these businesses just generated incremental off referrals. So, as a percentage of revenue, most contractors spend less than 1 to 2% of their revenue on marketing. And so it's sort of alarming. And so, well, part of our strategy is to aid these businesses and create a digital platform, still engage in the traditional marketing methods of print, and radio and TV. But the reality is, as humans, we interact through social media on a personal basis. And now that's sort of how we're transacting on a professional basis. And so these contractors have to move with the times, but it's a difficult thing for contractors that have done what they've always done. They will get what they've always got. And what we're sort of teaching them is how to use LSA, how to use PPC, how to use GMB. And it's an education, and there's a little bit of pushback on it for fear of, just not understanding. And that's part of what we do is we bring the understanding and the subject matter experts to the table to aid these businesses to get them that incremental growth.
And with that, do you typically use these social media platforms as your mode of advertising, or do you guys typically more use, Google ads or things like that, or what's kind of the angle of attack you guys do?
Yeah, I think our strategy's a bit more comprehensive. So there's a blended marketing approach. Digital is just a part of it. But it takes time. It takes time to warm up your digital approach in a market, and you have to supplement it with some of the traditional marketing vehicles or traditional radio and TV. And then, of course, sometimes, contractors and local communities fulfill some sort of philanthropic strategy. So it's more blended. I think the balance is what is best practice? Is it north of 5 or 6% of your revenue that you should spend? And you mentioned earlier, it's a competitive environment, yes, but it's an environment where the consumer is not necessarily aware of the products and services from these contractors and who they are. So it is very traditional in the sense of just getting your name out there, whether it's some sort of vanity marketing. Um, you want that phone to ring. We're so heavily lead dependent because we don't cold call on our customers.
And with with those different marketing strategies that you're helping these companies implement, as you mentioned, we were talking about, um, there's a lot of these companies offering services. Sometimes it's hard for, a homeowner, they just want to get their sink fixed. They just want to get their electricity fixed, and they're going to look up the first person they can find almost. What, other than this marketing strategy, what other things have you guys done to kind of stay ahead of the competitors and give them more of an edge?
Well, I think first and foremost, you got to pick up the phone. So you have to prohibit the customer's ability to call you, you not answer, and then move on to the next contractor.
Hmm.
That's sort of a number one in your book is answer the phone. But what we're doing to supplement that is we're implementing AI. And when we are not able, meaning there's some element of human error in everything that we do, particularly in business. So when we can't answer the phone, we're investing in an AI tools that actually answer the phone, and the bot will simulate a conversation to the best of its ability. And this technology's really come a long way in 6 months, where it simulates human interaction with the customer via text exchange, email exchange, or in some cases, verbally on the phone, which means the customer can call in 24/7 and get an immediate response. But it's not a response where, hey, we'll call you back. It's actually walking the customer through what is the issue? What service can we provide? Is it maintenance? Is it a repair? Is it a replacement? And if so, what is your availability, Mr. and Mrs. Jones? And if your availability is this Wednesday, we could be out there. And so having that exchange eliminates that human error. And that's where AI is going to be a real differentiator in the service world, because we know if we don't answer the phone or a customer thinks it's rang too many times, the drop call, then they will move on to the next contractor. And that's just something we can't afford to let happen.
Yeah, it's a great strategy to fill in those little gaps, fill in those like those pain points of the customer journey to help them get connected with you guys as quick as possible. Um, as I've personally reflected on the influence of AI in companies like this, I feel like it allows contractors to be contractors, and these tools allow them to not have to worry too much about answering the phone or the nitty gritty things, and they can grow a lot faster and be more comfortable with what they're used to. Do you feel like it's the same way that they're relieved to hand that off to other things and other systems?
I think there's a certain number of contractors that are adopting technology faster than others. But let's be frank, this is a mom and pop industry, and there are hundreds of thousands of contractors. And user adoption for technology is something that will always be a challenge. I think what you have to demonstrate to contractors is the use case. Not just what something can do, what has it done? You know, can you show an example where an AI bot has interacted with a customer via text exchange at 1 a.m. in the morning, and that customer that was surfing for that service could schedule an appointment? That resonates with a customer. 1 a.m., scheduled appointment, confirmation, need met, less focus on price. And then what we have to do is we have to do what we do really well as contractors. We got to get out in front of the customer. We got to give them multiple options. We have to lead with financing, because this stuff, do all the refrigerant changes, the tariffs, the high interest rates, these are things that come through in pricing. And so it is paramount now that we get in front of the customer and we talk about what their options are for payment once we've secured their commitment to procure these services.
So when you find these companies, you're really putting a big hand on their operations and things, helping them be more stable, be more effective. Um, I guess do you guys touch nearly every part and system of their business, or is there some things you just don't go into?
I think there are two things we don't really touch. One is we don't toy with the culture. Culture's something that every business has their own identity, and we just have no appetite for meddling with culture. The businesses we've invested in are successful, well run, profitable businesses. And let's be frank, in the service industry, we're not making anything. It's a people business. So, culture, both internally and externally, are the two things that we just don't mess with. And that has enabled us to continue, that customer first mentality, and then making sure that we're not changing internally how people feel about their workplace. Now, we will always try to strengthen the value proposition for working for that local brand, but how we face our employees and how we face our customers is something that we don't ever want to change, because that's essentially what's made these businesses successful. Think of us as people that work in the shadows, and we're strengthening the businesses across standard operating procedures and processes and systems by implementing AI or SaaS systems that are easier to work with on the fly. And those elevate the profile of the business and how they deliver that service, but we want our employees and customers to kind of feel and act like they always have.
And I mean, you guys are really helping these companies, find new people. You talked about the marketing side for them. I'm curious to see what's your guys' approach, what's your guys' strategy to finding these companies to work with. How do you go about finding these profitable businesses?
Well, that's probably the biggest challenge, right? Is there's plenty of contractors that want to sell, but they're not necessarily ready to sell. And so that's the first challenge. The second challenge is really understanding who to partner with, what makes a great company in the industry that we're in. There are several factors. Namely, today, the way the customer views the company, their Google or Yelp reviews, there's so many things that we evaluate, the mix of the business, the customer concentration, if there is some level of commercial, how much, who is it? And so those are all challenges getting to the buyer. And whether it comes through a buy side broker, a sell side broker, a relationship through someone or a referral or through my network, there's a variety of different sources, but it's sort of a needle in a haystack. As I mentioned earlier, there's hundreds of thousands of these contractors out there. So, part of it is just educating those contractors that are in process thinking about selling, who are the groups that are out there that maybe are well funded, um, and are they able to do a little due diligence on our groups and see how our partners have responded to our model. And we really try to, once we find a target to partner with, we really encourage those contractors to talk to our existing partners. Hey, what was the process like, pre and post close? Is it everything you thought it would be? And we encourage our partners to sort of talk about the good and the bad and the ugly, to stage, how difficult it is to actually sell your company.
There you go. And I mean, with your network, as you said, referrals, things like that, they can bring you new people. Do you guys have any, like, active marketing techniques or things you guys are doing, putting out ads, emails, things like that?
That is something that we do not engage in. There are groups that, send out letters and send out broadcast emails. I think, having spent a career in the trades, I try to leverage my network as best I can. And we have two sponsors that financially support our company, and we're able to take advantage of their resources as well. So Look, ideally, we want to control the narrative on the partnership. So we'd rather find people through more meaningful channels than just broadly casting a net because we have certain criteria. Not everybody's going to meet it. So we'd rather do the legwork to identify those companies and then make reasonable efforts through our channels to, you know, get in front of that owner.
And it's definitely some powerful tools that you have with your years of experience, your partners, your sponsors that you're bringing in. I mean, I think it goes to show, I mean, how powerful it is considering you guys have only been in business for a couple of years, already have hundreds of workers you're working with, many companies. I guess from here, I mean, you're only 2 years in, you're achieving a lot more than people could dream. What's your guys' next steps? I guess what's your like big picture vision for the company?
Look, we will always operate daily that we are creating a operating company and a culture. That's first and foremost what we think about. We do have investors, and those investors expect a return on their investment. Will the organization as it is today, um, exist tomorrow? Absolutely. Will it have new ownership? Possibly. What I don't focus on is I don't focus really on anything but thinking about how we can provide better products and services and retain who we have. There are decisions that will be made at some point in time as to whether we, as an existing ownership group, stay in this deal in perpetuity or we decide to move it on to the next buyer. But I think what's important for our company is to stay focused, be deliberate about providing that customer first mentality. We can't be distracted about the what ifs. That's for other people to decide. And as the leader, it's my goal to keep people focused on the short term goals and initiative, and then really to think strategically about the long-term initiatives. And to be honest with you, we're a little bit consumed right now with a lot of the things that are happening economically, and we have to navigate that. So we can't spend time thinking about, you know, whether we sell or not. What we have to think about is how do we grow? How do we continue to integrate the companies that we partner with, and how do we just become more effective and efficient at what we do? That's what's paramount.
How, I mean, it sounds like you guys, your long-term plan, you want to grow and build as much value as you can for both yourselves and these other companies. And we've touched on a lot of different things you guys do to do that. Um, would you say that, these changes economically have been kind of your biggest roadblock or hindrance in making that growth, or what do you see as being the biggest problem, the biggest thing you have to focus on going forward?
No, I'm very pleased with how we're growing. When you partner with 11 different companies, there's a fair amount of organized chaos. That's probably the best way to describe it. But I'm very pleased at how people in our organization still remain focused amongst that chaos. Um, Look, the reality is from year to year, there's always challenges. Are the challenges in 2025 a little bit greater than in previous years? Possibly. I mentioned the refrigerant changes causes the equipment to be more expensive. The tariffs, we don't assemble anything in our country anymore. So, places like Mexico, Canada, China that are making this stuff and importing raw materials, they got to pass on the cost to somebody. And then you got to ship it. And, by the time it gets through a distributor to us, it's pretty expensive. So we just have to figure out when that's going to really transpire. It's not all going to come at once. These announcements that have been made recently, we have a little bit of time to prepare. Not a lot of time, but we have time to prepare. I think part of what we need to do is really educate the customer on how to pay for it. Um, there's enough financing and leasing products out there to accommodate prime, near prime, and subprime buyers. And I think our job as a contractor is to educate the customers, because when you look at, the average disposable income of Americans today, or the average amount of money in their bank account, or the number or millions of Americans with tapped out credit cards, you know, they need to know what their options are. But those options need to cut across all buying folk. So we just have to get really good at educating the customers on what those options are. There's also still a fair amount of rebates that are available, whether they're in the States or nationally, that we need to educate the customer on. And I think that takes some of the sting out of these economic pressures, is just teaching the consumer, hey, there's a way to kind of meet your needs without it being a situation where you're cash strapped. Um, and so, look, I don't want to belittle that the tariffs are not something that we need to deal with, but we've been dealing with price increases all through COVID, when the production lines were down and things got more expensive, and there was more demand than there was supply for equipment. And we just deal with it like anything. I would say some people will retreat, and then I saw today most contractors should see it as a call to action to do something different.
I guess you could, what you're saying is it's a good opportunity to refocus, right? Restructure, rethink. I mean, that's what you guys are doing. You're taking these companies and helping them catch up with times and ways, implement new practices. And I mean, as we've talked about and as you said, the experience you're bringing into this is probably invaluable from your time in the trades. So kind of to refocus a little away from the company, a little more towards you for the last little bit. I'm curious as to one, what are types of skills or things that you've personally worked on as you've come to this point, as you've gained these, come to this really high point in your career, and what skills are you currently working on as a leader, as a business owner?
I don't think I ever appreciated that it takes a lifetime of working to get to this point. Um, I think I'd be honest with you. I don't think I was ready to be where I am um, early on in my career. I'm indebted to those leaders and those organizations that invested in me, but it really does take a lifetime to get to the top in many ways. And I feel like humbled that I have the opportunity. I think the skills that you develop over a career are very technical and functional in nature. I would think the skills that we learn as top leaders now and that we try to hone is, how articulate are we about our business, and how much insight do we have to people that really kind of make the business go round? Do we think about putting the right people in the right seats, doing the work that really matters? Because we have the subject matter experts, or I should say, I have the subject matter experts. I don't have to be that person anymore. I have to confide in them and trust them to make really good decisions that I made or didn't make, because I've made plenty of mistakes in my career. But I think now I'm a facilitator, and those skills to facilitate require a lot of looking inward and understanding how people think, how people work, how people interact. So less of what I do is really industry focused. Yeah, there's a little bit of that, but it's really focused on the people that kind of make things go round, and it's not always smooth. So I think my challenge in development as a leader at this level is to focus on making sure that we've got the right people. And then once you have the right people, let them do what they do best. And that's always a challenge, because we grow up in an industry or career, and we're so used to making decisions, and we trust our own instincts. Um, but when I don't have anyone but me to make the decision, I ask myself, can I make all these decisions for every facet of the business? And the simple answer is absolutely not. So you got to put the right people in those positions to make the decisions, and you got to be able to facilitate making it happen.
A lot of skills to have, a lot of things to learn, like you said. It must take a lifetime. Well, thank you for being on the podcast today. Really, really unique and interesting business you got there. Obviously, you're the type of companies you work with are unique, uniquely positioned in the ways you guys are looking for. Let's say someone wants to stumble across this and be interested to find if they're one of those needles in the haystack for you guys. What would be a good way to reach out to you guys? What does that, put it simply, what does that process look like?
Well, I think, first and foremost, when we partner with companies, we want to build a relationship. And I think it starts with people like myself. So I always encourage, if you have someone that is interested in talking to us, that they get in contact with me directly. I like to talk about our journey. I like to talk about what or how meaningful we can be to a contractor for that next chapter. So I would encourage them to come to me, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to kind of tell you a little bit about Columbia Home Services and what we're doing. And we feel confident that we're a great partner, and we'd be welcome to talk to anybody.
There you go. Well, thanks for your time. Before we wrap up here, is there anything else you feel like would be of value to people, or anything else you'd want to share?
No, I think we're good. We covered it.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks so much, Paul. And thank you everyone for tuning in to the podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.